Welcome, crew, and greetings to all of our new listeners. Secure your tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the La Platas on a rocky mountain high. Get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners and settle down snugly at mile marker 420 in colorful Colorado. It is Sunday, August 14th, Monday, August 15th for those of you across the pond and beyond. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you, and welcome to We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. I hope you guys have had a thoroughly awesome weekend. Mine's been pretty eventful. I have this nice little hoarse-sounding voice due to working overnight at the fair in the barn with all kinds of who knows what flying through the air. So yeah, I sound a little sultry. Pretty intriguing. News. If you're listening to us live right now, you're listening to us on Spreaker.com. You may also find us live on KPNL Radio, which you can find on KPNL Radio at kpnl-db.com. If you like to listen to us in your free time, whether you're working or working it or working out, you can find us once more on We Are Paradox Media under Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Castbox, Tumblr, SoundCloud, TuneIn Radio, Deezer, Podcast Addict, and Podcast Chaser. It does appear that we are no longer grounded from YouTube, so make sure you go over there, look us up under We Are Paradox Media, and subscribe. Please subscribe. The more we get, as far as listeners, the better off we are. If you listen to a show, make sure you like it, leave any comments pertaining to the show, and also let me know if there are any guests that you would like me to have on. I will surely look them up and get them on here because I'm here to please my peeps. So, party foul. Thought we had Vinny Vineyard, aka Funkmaster V, and Luke Walker, aka Big Luke, on the show tonight, but I didn't advertise for that. I did advertise for story time, and fortunately, aka unfortunately, Luke is actually doing a gig right now. So, guess what? Story time with me, TessaTNT tonight. So we get to hang out. Just me and you. We're gonna have a good time. Yeah, I'm a little sniffly, allergies, coughed up yuckiness. What a way to go. But it was an awesome job. I love the animals. They're so cute, especially this one pig. I don't remember what her first name was, but I called her Cheetah because she's spotted, and she was the cutest, smartest, funniest little pig I have ever met. She was my favorite, I must say. So I may mess around with these settings really quick just because. Hold on, my nose is running. It's running. Oh man. It just seems like it's not very loud, and I'm trying to figure out, is it this one, or is it this one? Yep, it's that one. It's my Yeti Blue mic. So yeah, I guess I'm just like, I don't know. I'm gonna leave it alone because I don't think it's the mic. I think it's just my voice. So bear with me, grr. Yeah, it was a good time at the fair. Really uneventful as far as, kids. Yeah, we had a few times where they're running around doing general things, but we're not babysitters. The only thing that I don't like is they think it's funny to go through and turn on one of the spigots on the outside, so hourly I'll go and check that just to make sure. Because I don't want my little pets harmed in any way. I don't want them to get wet, get pneumonia, etc. I got to work with my daughter, and it really was a good time all throughout. I was going to work last night, but handed that over to Johnny because he got a little gypped on the hours. My friend Johnny, he's also a Marine, and he served in Vietnam. Just recently had hip replacements, but he's doing really good. I was sad I didn't get to see him because he was on the other side of the fairgrounds, and I was the only one tending the barn at a certain time, so didn't get to see my buddy. So hopefully Nova had a good night last night without her measure. I actually had some teenagers show up at my house last night looking for Nova and Dakota. They weren't there, so they were asking for a ride to a party, and I'm like, I'm sorry, girls. I am not getting behind the wheel of a car. Yay, the champ is here. What's up, champ? I love my champ. He's awesome. Woot woot, champ is in the house. Yeah, champ, I was just telling everybody, we're going to do story time tonight. Luke and Vinny, we don't have them on until next month. We're trying to figure out a date to see what works best for them, but yeah, it's going to be awesome. I love those guys. They're so much fun. Vinny makes me laugh so much, so does Luke. And they're very talented fellows, you know? They were in the wrestling world for quite some time. Now they're doing Wrestling with Ghosts, which you can find on a Paranormal TV app that they have going on. Also, you can find their movies either on Amazon Prime, other locations, as well as Walmart. I believe it was The Hike is for sale there, and it might be WDJ Radio as well. I think I got that title right. Not quite sure. Let me see if I can look it up really quick. Yeah, I don't know if you guys have seen these movies, but they do a really, really good job with it. Aww. All these kids growing up so fast. It's insane. It's craziness. Quit growing. Vinny Vineyard, Funkmaster V. Okay, so it's called WJHCAM. You can find that at Walmart. They're working on a new movie called Camp Smokey. And if you haven't seen it yet, you gotta look it up and watch it. We got The Hype out there. And yeah, like I said, I really love their movies. I really love what they do. And I really love the talent. Alright, so the story which I'll be reading from for the first 2 hours of our show is Bram Stokers' Dracula, and it's from one of the books I inherited from my grandpa when he passed away. And this book is 3 novels in one. So first we're going to be reading Dracula by Bram Stoker. Then we have Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. For our third hour, we're going to be reading ghost stories from Reddit, and it's going to be a good time all in all, through and through. Where is my bookmarker? There it is. Here we go. So, we're going to go back to Miss Mina Harker's journal. All right, champ, sounds like a plan. Mm-hmm. Barn Biddies. One October. It is strange to me to be kept in the dark as I am today, after Jonathan's full confidence for so many years, to see him manifestly avoid certain matters, and those the most vital of all. This morning I slept late after the fatigues of yesterday, and though Jonathan was late too, he was the earlier. He spoke to me before he went out, never much sweetly or tenderly, but he never mentioned a word of what had happened in the visit to the Count's house. And yet he must have known how terribly anxious I was. Poor dear fellow, I suppose it must have distressed him even more than it did me. They all agreed that it was best that I should not be drawn further into this awful work, and acquiesced. But to think that he keeps anything from me. Now I am crying like a silly fool when I know it comes from my husband's great love and from the good wishes of those other strong men. That has done me good. Well, some day Jonathan will tell me and let it should ever be that he should think for a moment that I kept anything from him, I still keep my journal as usual. Then, if he has doubted of my trust, I shall show it to him, with every thought of my heart put down for his dear eyes to read. I feel strangely sad and low-spirited today. I suppose it is the reaction from the terrible excitement. Last night I went to bed when the men had gone, simply because they told me to. I didn't feel sleepy, and I feel full of devouring anxiety. I kept thinking over everything that has been ever since Jonathan came to see me in London, and it all seems like a horrible tragedy, with fate pressing on relentlessly to some destined end. Everything that one does seems, no matter how right it may be, to bring on the very thing which is most to be deplored. If I hadn't gone to Whitby, perhaps poor dear Lucy would be with us now. She hadn't taken to visiting the churchyard till I came, and if she hadn't come there in the daytime with me, she wouldn't have walked there in her sleep. And if she hadn't gone there at night and to sleep, that monster couldn't have destroyed her as he did. Oh, why did I ever go to Whitby? There now, crying again. I wonder what has come over me today. I must hide it from Jonathan, for if he knew that I had been crying twice in one morning, I, who never cried on my own account, and whom he has never caused to shed a tear, the dear fellow would fret his heart out. I shall put a bold face on, and if I do feel weepy, I shall never see it. I suppose it is one of the lessons that we poor women have to learn. I can't quite remember how I fell asleep last night. I remember hearing the sudden barking of the dogs and a lot of queer sounds, like braying on the very tumultuous skell from Mr. Renfield's room, which is somewhere under this. And then there was silence over everything, silence so profound that it startled me, and I got up and looked out the window. All was dark and silent, black shadows thrown by the moonlight seemed full of silent mystery of their own. Not a thing seemed to be stirring, but all to be grim and fixed as death or fate, so that a thin streak of white mist that crept with almost imperceptible slowness across the grass towards the house seemed to have a sentience and a vitality of its own. I think that the digression of my thoughts must have done me good, for when I got back to bed I found lethargy creeping over me. I lay a while, but could not quite sleep, so I got out and looked out of the window again. The mist was spreading, and was now close up to the house, so that I could see it lying thick against the wall as though it were stealing at the windows. The poor man was more loud than ever, and though I could not distinguish a word he said, I could in some way recognize in his tones some passionate entreaty on his part. Then there was the sound of a struggle, and I knew that the attendants were dealing with him. I was so frightened that I crept into bed and pulled the clothes over my head, putting my fingers in my ears. I was not then a bit sleepy, at least so I thought, but I must have fallen asleep, for, except dreams, I do not remember anything until the morning, when Jonathan woke me up. I think that it took me an effort and a little time to realize where I was, and that it was Jonathan who was bending over me. My dream was very peculiar, and was almost typical of the way that waking thoughts become merged in, or continued in, dreams. Look over here really quick, check the chat. Yep, everything's good. I thought that I was asleep and waiting for Jonathan to come back. I was very anxious about him and was powerless to act. My feet and my hands and my brain were weighted, so that nothing could proceed at the usual place. And so I slept uneasily and thought. Then it began to dawn upon me that the air was heavy and damp and cold. I put the clothes from my face and found, to my surprise, that all was dim around me. The gaslight, which I had left lit for Jonathan, had turned down, came only like a tiny red spark through the fog. which had evidently grown thicker and poured into the room. Then it occurred to me that I had shut the window before I had come to bed. I would have got out, make certain on the point, but some leaden lethargy seemed to chain my limbs and even my will. I lay still and endured. That was all. I closed my eyes, but could still see through my eyelids. It is wonderful that tricks of our dreams play us, and see now how it came in. How conveniently we can imagine. The mist grew thicker and thicker, and I could see now how it came in, for I could see it like smoke, or with the white energy of boiling water, pouring in, not through the window, but through the joinings of the door. It got thicker and thicker. It seemed as if it became concentrated into sort of pillar of a cloud in the room, through the top of which I could see the light of the gas shining like a red eye. Things began to whirl through my brain, just as the cloudy column was now whirling in the room, and through it all came the scriptural words, "A pillar of cloud by day, and of fire by night." Was it indeed some spiritual guidance that was coming to me in my sleep? But the pillar was composed of both the day and the night guiding, for the fire was in the red eye, which at the thought got a new fascination for me, till, as I looked, the fire divided, and seemed to shine on me through the fog like two red eyes, such as Lucy told me of her own momentary mental wandering when, on the cliff, the dying sunlight struck the windows of St. Mary's Church. Suddenly the horror burst upon me that it was thus that Jonathan had seen those awful women growing into reality through the whirling mist and the moonlight. And in my dream, I must have fainted, for all became black darkness. The last conscious effort which imagination made was to show me a livid white face bending over me out of the mist. I must be careful of such dreams, for they would unseat one's reason if there was too much of them. I would get Dr. Van Helsing or Dr. Seward to prescribe something for me which would make me sleep, only that I feared to alarm them. Such a dream at the present time would become woven into their fears for me. Tonight I shall strive hard to sleep naturally. If I do not, I shall tomorrow. Tomorrow night get them to give me a dose of chloral. It cannot hurt me for once, and it will give me a good night's sleep. Last night tired me more than if I had not slept at all. 2 October, 10 p.m. Last night I slept, but did not dream. I must have slept soundly, for I was not waked by Jonathan Corning to bed. But the sleep was not refreshed me, for today I feel terribly weak and spiritless. I spent all yesterday trying to read or lying down dozing. In the afternoon, Mr. Renfield asked if he might see me. Poor man, he was very gentle, and when I came away he kissed my hand and bade God bless me. Some way it affected me much. I am crying when I think of him. This is a new weakness, of which I must be careful. Jonathan would be miserable if he knew I had been crying. He and the others were out until dinner time, and they came in tired. I did what I could to brighten them up, and I suppose that the effort did me good, for I forgot how tired I was. After dinner they sent me to bed, and all went off to smoke together, as they said, but I knew that they wanted to tell each other of what had occurred to each during the day. I could see from Jonathan's manner that he had something important to communicate. I was not so sleepy as I should have been, so before they went I asked Dr. Seward to give me a little opiate of some kind, as I had not slept well the night before. He very kindly made me up a sleeping draught, which he gave me, telling me that it would be no harm, as it was very mild. I have taken it, and am waiting for sleep, which still keeps aloof. I hope I have not done wrong, for as sleep begins to flirt with me, I fear, a new fear which comes, that I may have been foolish in thus depriving myself of the power of waking. I might want it. Here comes sleep. Good night. chapter 20, I believe. Yes, chapter 20. Jonathan Harker's Journal. 1 October evening. So, October 1st. I found Thomas Snelling in his house at Bethnal Green, but unhappily he was not in a condition to remember anything. The very prospect of beer which my expected coming had opened to him had proven too much, and he had begun too early on his expected bock. I learned, however, from his wife, who seemed a decent poor soul, that he was only the assistant to Smollett, who of the two mates was the responsible person. So off I drove to Walworth, and found Mr. Joseph Smollett at home in his shirt-sleeves, taking a late tea out of a saucer. He is a decent, intelligent fellow, distinctly a good, reliable type of workman, and with a headpiece of his own. He remembered all about the incident of the boxes and from a wonderful dog's-eared notebook, which he produced from some mysterious receptacle about the seat of his trousers, and which had hieroglyphical entries in thick, half-obliterated pencil. He gave me the destinations of the boxes. There were, he said, 6 in the cartload, which he took from Carfax and left at 197 Jamaica Lane in Bermondsey. If then the Count meant to scatter these ghastly refuges of his over London, these places were chosen at the first of delivery, so that later he might distribute more fully. The systematic manner in which was this done made me think that he could not mean to confine himself to 2 sides of London. He was now fixed on the far east of the northern shore, on the east of the southern shore, and on the south. The north and west were surely never meant to be left out of his diabolical scheme, let alone the city itself in the very heart of fashionable London in the south-west and west. I went back to Smollett and asked him if he could tell us if any other boxes had been taken from Carfax. The strongest chap I ever struck, and him an old feller with a white moustache, and then that thin you would think he couldn't throw a shader. How this phrase thrilled me through. Why, it took up his end of the boxes like those pounds of tea, and me a puffin' and a blowin' a full. I could up in mine anyhow, and I'm no chicken either. How did you get into the house in Piccadilly? I asked. He was there too. He must have started off and got there afore me, for when I rung the bell he came in, opened the door himself, and helped me carry the boxes into the hall. The whole 9? I asked. Yes, there was 5 in the first load, and 4 in the second. It was main dry work, and I don't so well remember how I got 'em. I interrupted him. Were the boxes left in the hall? Yes, it was a big hall, and there was nothing else in it. I made one more attempt to further matters. You didn't have any key? Never used no key nor nothink. The old gent, he opened the door hisself and shut it again when I drove off. I don't remember the last time, but that was the beer. And you can't remember the number of the house? No, sir, but you needn't have no difficulty about that. It's I own with stone front with a bow in it, and I steps up the door. You know them steps, having had to carry the boxes and the 3 loafers what come round to earn a copper. The old gent give them shillings, and they seen they got so much, they warned me, but he took one of them by the shoulder and was to throw him down the steps till the lot of them went away cussin'. I thought with his description I could find the house. So having paid my friend for his information, I started off for Piccadilly. I gained a new painful experience. The Count could, it was evident, handle the earth boxes himself. If so, time was precious, for now he had achieved a certain amount of distribution. He could, by choosing his own time, complete the task unobserved. At Piccadilly Circus, I was discharged my cab and walked westward. Beyond the Junior Constitutional, I came across the house described, and was satisfied that this was the next of the lairs arranged by Dracula. The house looked as though it had been long unattended. The windows were encrusted with dust, and the shutters were up. All the framework was black with time, and from the iron the paint had mostly scaled away. It was evident that up till lately there had been a large notice board in front of the balcony. It had, however, been roughly torn away, the uprights which had supported it still remaining. Behind the rails of the balcony I saw that there were some of those loose boards whose raw edges looked white. I would have given a good deal to have been able to see the notice board intact, as it would, perhaps, have given some clue to the ownership of the house. I remembered my experience of the investigation and purchase of Carfax, and I could not but feel that if I could find the former owner, there might be some means of gaining access to the house. There was at present nothing to be learned from the Piccadilly side, and nothing could be done. So I went round to the back to see if anything could be gathered from this quarter. The mews were active, the Piccadilly houses were mostly in occupation. I asked one or two of the grooms and helpers whom I saw around if they could tell me anything about the empty house. One of them said he had heard it had lately been taken, but he couldn't say from whom. He told me, however, that up to the very lately there had been a notice board of "For Sale" up, and that perhaps Mitchell, Sons and Candy, the house agents, could tell me something, as he thought he remembered seeing the name of that firm on the board. I did not wish to seem too eager or to let my information know or guess too much, so, thanking him in the usual manner, I strolled away. It was now growing dusk, and the autumn night was closing in, so I did not lose any time, having learned that the address of Mitchell, Sons and Candy from a directory at the Berkeley. I was soon at their office in Sackville Street. The gentleman who saw me was particularly suave in manner, but uncommunicative in equal proportion. Having once told me that the Piccadilly house, which throughout our interview he called the mansion, was sold, he considered my business as concluded. When I asked who had purchased it, he opened his eyes a thought wider and paused a few seconds before replying. "It is sold, sir." "Pardon me," I said, with equal politeness, "but I have a special reason for wishing to know who purchased it." Again he paused longer, and raised his eyebrows still more. "It is sold, sir," was again his laconic reply. "Surely," I said, "you do not mind letting me know so much." "But I do mind," he answered. "The affairs of their clients are absolutely safe in the hands of Mitchell, Sons and Candy." This was manifestly a prig of the first water, and there was no use arguing with him. I thought I had best meet him on his own ground, so I said, "Your clients, sir, are happy in having so resolute a guardian of their confidence. I am myself a professional man." Here I handed him my card. "In this instance, I am not prompted by curiosity. I act on the part of Lord Godalming, who wishes to know something of the property which was, he understood, lately for sale." These words put a different complexion on affairs, and he said, "I would like to oblige you if I could, Mr. Harker, and especially would I like to oblige his lordship. He once carried out a small matter of renting some chambers for him when he was the Honourable Arthur Holmwood. If you will let me have his lordship's address, I will consult the house on the subject, and will, in any case, so far deviate from our rules as to give the required information to his lordship." I wanted to secure a friend and not to make an enemy, so I thanked him, gave him the address of Dr. Seward's, and came away. It was now dark, and I was tired and hungry. I got a cup of tea at the Aerated Bread Company and came down to the Purfleet by the next train. I found all the others at home. Nina was looking tired and pale, and she made a gallant effort to be bright and cheerful. It wrung my heart to think that I had to keep anything from her, and so caused her disquiet. disquietude. So I thanked him. Thank God this will be the last night of her looking on out of conferences and feeling the sting of our not showing our confidence. It took all my courage to hold to the wise resolution of keeping her out of our grim task. He seems somehow more reconciled, or else the very subject seems to have become repugnant to her. For when my accidental allusion is made, she actually shudders. I am glad we made our resolution in time, as with such a feeling as this our growing knowledge would be torture to her. I could not tell the others of the day's discovery till we were alone. So after dinner, followed by a little music to save appearances even amongst ourselves, I took Mina to her room and left her to go to bed. The dear girl was more affectionate with me than ever and clung to me as though she would detain me. But there was much to be talked of, and I came away. Thank God the ceasing of telling things was made no difference between us. When I came down again, I found the others all gathered round the fire in the study. In the train I had written my diary so far, and simply read it off to them as the best means of letting them get abreast of my own information. When I had finished, Van Helsing said, "This has been a great day's work, friend Jonathan. Doubtless we are on the track of the missing boxes. If we find them all in that house, then our work is near the end. But if there be some missing, we must search until we find them. Then shall we make our final coup and hunt the wretch to this real death." We all sat silent a while, and all at once Mr. Moore spoke. "Say, how are we going to get into that house?" "We got into the other," answered Lord Godalming quickly. "But, Art, this is different. We broke house at Carfax, but we had night and a walled park to protect us. It will be a mighty different thing to commit burglary in Piccadilly, either by day or night. I confess I don't see how we are going to get in unless that agency Duck can find us a key of some sort. Perhaps we shall know when we get his letter in the morning." Lord Godalming's brows contracted, and he stood up and walked about the room. By and by he stopped and said, turning from one to another of us, "Quincy's head is level. This burglary business is getting serious. We got off once all night, but we have now a rare job on hand, unless we can find the Count's key basket. As nothing could well be done before morning, and as it would be at last advisable to wait till Lord Godalming should hear from Mitchell's, we decided not to take any active step before breakfast time. For a good while we sat and smoked, discussing the matter in its various bearings. I took the opportunity of bringing this diary right up to the moment. I am very sleepy and shall go to bed. Just a line. Mina sleeps soundly, and her breathing is regular. Her forehead is puckered up into little wrinkles, as though she thinks even in her sleep. She is still too pale, but does not look so haggard as she did this morning. Tomorrow will, I hope, mend all of this. She will be herself at home in Exeter. Oh, but I am sleepy." Dr. Seward's Diary. 1 October. I am puzzled afresh about Renfield. His moods change so rapidly, and I find it difficult to keep touch with him. As they always mean something more than this own well-being, they form a more than interesting study. This morning, when I went to see him after his repulse of Van Helsing, his manner was that of a man commanding destiny. He was, in fact, commanding destiny, subjectively. He did not really care for any of the things of mere earth. He was in the clouds and looked down on all the weakness and want of us poor mortals. I thought I would improve the occasion and learn something, so I asked him, "What about the flies these times?" He smiled on me in quite a superior sort of way, such a smile as would have become the face of Malvolio, as he answered me, "The fly, dear sir, has one striking feature. Its wings are typical of the aerial powers of the psychic faculties. The ancients did well when they typified the soul as a butterfly." I thought I would push his analogy to its utmost logically, so I said quickly, "Oh, it is a soul you are after now, is it?" His madness foiled his reason, and a puzzled look spread over his face, as shaking his head with a decision which had but seldom seen in him, he said, "Oh, no, no, I want no souls. Life is all I want." Here he brightened up. "I'm pretty indifferent about it at present. Life is all right. I have all I want. You must get a new patient, doctor, if you wish to study zoophagy." This puzzled me a little, so I drew him on. "Then you command life? You are God, I suppose?" He smiled with an ineffably benign superiority. "Oh, no. Far be it from me to attribute to myself the attributes of the deity. I am not even concerned in his especially spiritual doings. If I may state my intellectual position, I am, so far as concerns things purely terrestrial, somewhat in the position which Enoch occupied spiritually." This was a poser to me. I could not at the moment recall Enoch's oppositeness, so I had to ask a simple question, though I felt that by doing so I was lowering myself in the eyes of the lunatic. "And why Enoch?" "Because he walked with God." I could not see the analogy, but did not like to admit it, so I harked back to what he had denied. "So, you don't care about life, you don't want souls, why not?" I put my question quickly and somewhat sternly, on purpose to disconcert him. The effort succeeded. For an instant he unconsciously relapsed into his old servile manner, bent low before me, and actually fawned upon me as he replied, "I don't want any souls, indeed, indeed, I don't. I couldn't use them if I had them. They would be no manner of use to me. I couldn't eat them, or—" He suddenly stopped, and the old cunning look spread over his face, like a wind sweep on the surface of the water. "And, doctor, as to life, what is it after all? When you've got all you require, and you know that you will never want, that is all. I have friends, good friends, like you, Dr. Seward," he said with a leer of inexpressible cunning. "I know that I shall never lack the means of life." I think that through the cloudiness of his insanity he saw some antagonism in me, for he at once fell back on the last refuge of such as he, a dogged silence. After a short time I saw that for the present it was useless to speak to him. He was sulky, and so I came away. Later in the day he sent for me. Ordinarily I would not have come without special reason, but just at present I was so interested in him that I would gladly make an effort. Besides, I am glad to have anything to help to pass the time. Harker is out, following up clues, and so are Lord Godalming and Quincy. Van Helsing sits in my study poring over the record prepared by the Harkers. He seems to think that the acute knowledge of all details he will light upon some clue. He does not wish to be disturbed in the work without cause. I would have taken him with me to see the patient, only I thought that after his last repulse he might not come or care to go again. There was also another reason. Renfield might not speak so freely before a third person as when he and I were alone. I found him sitting out in the middle of the floor on his stool, a pose which is generally indicative of some mental energy on his part. When I came in, he said at once, as though the question had been waiting on his lips, "What about souls?" It was evident then that my surmise had been correct. Unconscious cerebration was doing its work, even with the lunatic. I determined to have the matter out. "What about them yourself?" I asked. He did not reply for a moment, but looked all around him and up and down as though he expected to find some inspiration for an answer. "I don't want any souls," he said feebly, apologetic way. The matter seemed prying on his mind, and so I determined to use it, to be cruel only to be kind. So I said, "You like life, and you want life?" "Oh, yes, but that is all right. You needn't worry about that." "But," I asked, "how are we to get the life without getting the soul also?" This seemed to puzzle him, so I followed it up. "A nice time you'll have some time when you're flying out there with the souls of thousands of flies and spiders and birds and cats, buzzing and twittering and mawing all round you. You've got their lives, you know, and you must put up with their souls." Something seemed to affect his imagination, for he put his fingers to his ears and shut his eyes, screwing them up tightly just as a small boy does when his face is being soaped. There was something pathetic in it that touched me. It also gave me a lesson, for it seemed that before me was a child, only a child, though the features were worn and the stubble on the jaws was white. It was evident that he was undergoing some process of mental disturbance, and, knowing how his past moods had interpreted things seemingly foreign to himself, I thought I would enter into his mind as well. I could, and go with him. The first step was to restore confidence, so I asked him, speaking pretty loud so that he would hear me through his closed ears, "Would you like some sugar to get your flies round again?" He seemed to wake up all at once and shook his head. With a laugh he replied, "Not much. Flies are poor things after all." After a pause he added, "But I don't want their souls buzzing round me all the same." "Or spiders?" I went on. "Oh, spiders. What's the use of spiders? There isn't anything in them to eat or—" He stopped suddenly, as though reminded of a forbidden topic. So, I thought to myself, this is the second time he suddenly stopped at the word drink. What does it mean? Renfield seemed himself aware of having made a lapse, for he hurried on, as though to distract my attention from it. "Don't take any stock, all, in such matters. Rats and mice and such small deer, as Shakespeare has it, chicken feed of the larder, they might, he calls. I past all that sort of nonsense. You might as well ask a man to eat molecules with a pair of chopsticks as to try to interest me about the lesser carnivore when I know of what is before me." "I see," I said. "You want big things that you can make your teeth meet in? How would you like to breakfast an elephant?" "What ridiculous nonsense you are talking." He was getting too wide awake, so I thought I would press him hard. "I wonder," I said reflectively, "what an elephant's soul is like." The effect I desired was obtained, for he at once fell from his high horse and became a child again. "I don't want an elephant's soul, or any soul at all," he said. For a few moments he sat despondently. Suddenly he jumped to his feet with his eyes blazing and all the signs of intense cerebral excitement. "To hell with you and your souls," he shouted. Why do you plague me about souls? Haven't I got enough to worry about? And pain, and distract me already without thinking of souls? He looked so hostile that I thought he was in for another homicidal fit. So I blew my whistle. The instant, however, that I did so, he became calm and said apologetically, "Forgive me, doctor. I forgot myself. You do not need any help. I'm so worried in my mind that I am apt to be irritable. You only knew the problem I have to face, and that I am working out, you would pity and tolerate and pardon me. Pray do not put me in a strait waistcoat. I want to think, and I cannot think freely when my body is confined. I am sure you will understand." He had evidently self-control, so when the attendants came, I told them not to mind, and they withdrew. Renfield watched them go. When the door was closed, he said, with considerable dignity and sweetness, "Dr. Seward, you have been very considerate towards me. Believe me that I am very, very grateful to you." I thought it well to leave him in this mood, and so I came away. There's certainly something to ponder over in this man's state. Several points seem to make what the American interviewer calls a story. If one could only get them in proper order, here they are. Will not mention drinking. Fears the thought of being burdened with the soul of anything. Has no dread of wanting life in the future. Despises the manner forms of life altogether, though he dreads being haunted by their souls. Logically, all these things point one way. He has assurance of some kind that he will acquire some higher life. He dreads the consequence, the burden of a soul, then it is a human life he looks so. And the assurance? Merciful God, the Count has been to him, and there is some new scheme of terror afoot. Later. I went after my round to Van Helsing and told him my suspicion. He grew very grave, and after thinking the matter over for a while, asked me to take him to Renfield, and I did so. As we came to the door, we heard the lunatic within singing gaily, as he used to do in the time which now seems so long ago. When we entered, we saw with amazement that he had spread out his sugar as of old. The flies, lethargic with the autumn, were beginning to buzz into the room. We tried to make him talk to the subject of our previous conversation, but he would not attend. He went on with the singing, just as though we had not been present. He had got a scrap of paper and was folding it into a notebook. We had to come away as ignorant as we went in. His is a curious case indeed. We must watch him tonight. Letter Mitchell, Sons, and Candy to Lord Goldmink. 1 October. My Lord, we are at all times only too happy to meet with your wishes. We beg, with regard to the desire of your lordship expressed by Mr. Harker on your behalf, to supply the following information concerning the sale and the purchase of number 347 Piccadilly. The original vendors are the executors of the late Mr. Archibald Winter Suffolk. The purchase is a foreign nobleman, Count de Ville, who effected the purchase himself, paying the purchase money in notes over the counter. Your lordship will pardon us using so vulgar an expression. Beyond this, we know nothing whatsoever of him. We are, my lord, your lordship's humble servants, Mitchell, Sons, and Candy. Hello, beautiful Sister Sandra. All right, so I think we're going to pause there. Next, we're going back to Dr. Seward's diary in Bram Stokers' Dracula. So awesome to see you guys in the chat. Let me try to scroll down here. Yay! Oh, just got back from the lake. Last time I went to the lake, burned my boobs. But they're much better now. I've peeled off part of that horrible layer, and I still have a little bit left to go. All right, so on this break, we have Gravity from Krakow, Poland, with Throw You Away and Take a Walk in My Shoes. Then we have Prime Example featuring Miss Carolyn Dowles and our musical host with Dancing Machine. We have Fred Johnson III with Sugar, and then we have, hold on one second, Mr. Jeff Hilliard with Finger Bang Your Day. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this music break.
scene. We can hit another club if that's your thing. We'll be partners in crime, you and me, as we ripping up floors like two dancing machines.
Down the street, thinking all the things you said you need. Why don't you tell me, baby, how do you feel? So I walk down the street, thinking all the things you said you need. Why don't you tell me, baby, how do you feel? Don't you take a walk? Why don't you take a walk? In my shoes, why don't you take a walk? Before you tell me what to do, don't you take a walk? Why don't you take a walk? In my shoes, why don't you take a walk? Before you tell me what to do. No, it's easy, you tell me what to do. Have you ever stopped to think all the things that I've been through? No, it's easy, you tell me what to do. Have you ever stopped to think all the things that I've been through? Don't you take a walk? Or don't you take a walk? In my shoes, or don't you, baby, take a walk? Before you tell me what to do. Or don't you take a walk? Or don't you take a walk? In my shoes, or don't you, baby, take a walk? Before you tell me what to do. Waiting here on this cold, lonely night without you. The tension's overbearing. Wondering, are you coming back home again? To inspire fondness with love. Where did our love go wrong? monster girl. When your life is a never-ending train wreck, and you feel like you're drowning in a sea of regret, with a bit of oppression pressing down on your neck, it hurts so bad. When your overwhelming hatred kills your heart's desire, and reality starts looking like a dumpster fire, you start bitching to me, but you're preaching to the choir. You don't need to be so mad, 'cause sometimes we hurt, sometimes we cry, sometimes we're sure there's no reason to try. When the whole world goes completely insane, open your heart, stand up and sing. I'm gonna finger bang my day. Yeah, yeah, I'll finger bang my day. That's right. You gotta make the choice to give it all you've got, and make your day long with pleasure, really make it hot. Because your day deserves a lover that pulls out the stops. Come on, it's not so hard. 'Cause sometimes we hurt, sometimes we cry, sometimes we sure there's no reason to try. When the whole world blows up in our face, what else could we do but stand up and sing? I'm gonna finger bang my day. Yeah, yeah, finger bang my day. Hey, what are we really doing? We can't live in a world that has this much hate. We have to get honest with ourselves. We have to take stock in what our part is in all of this madness. We have to let go, and we focus on giving love, setting that intention. And each and every single one of us gets up every day with the intention to give love. And we do it. We go out there and we give love every single day. Each one of us gets out there and makes love to our day, giving our day a multiple orgasm. The whole world will be orgasmic for the rest of eternity. Sometimes we hurt, sometimes we cry, sometimes we sure there's no reason to try. When the whole world is fucking insane, we open our hearts, stand up and sing. I'm gonna finger bang my day. Finger bang my day. Finger bang my day. Let's open our hearts, stand up and sing. I'm gonna finger bang my day. Yeah, yeah. Finger bang my day.
I love Mr. Jeff Hilliard. He's amazing. I hope to have him on again soon in the future. Last time I had him on, got this new computer, had it all set up. The sound was bouncing, but I just couldn't hear him. And I just had to get my computer to recognize my headphones, because otherwise it just would play through the speakers. So I got that all figured out, but yeah. Unfortunately, had to turn off my fan in here. It is a hot and muggy Sunday here in southwest Colorado. I would like to blame the rain for that. Grateful we got it. Hopefully it'll get us out of this drought situation we've been facing. But onward and upward we shall go to our book, Bram Stokers' Dracula. we're actually getting pretty close to the end on this. No, we're not. Just a little over 100 pages, and we'll get there. Yay. Frankenstein is the next one. Alright, so we read the letter from Sons and Candy, and Lord Goldman was the one to get it. Mitchell, Sons and Candy. What a name. Dr. Seward's Diary, 2 October. Placed a man in the corridor last night and told him to make an accurate note of any sound he might hear from Renfield's room, and gave him instructions that if there should be anything strange, he was to call me. After dinner, when we had gathered round the fire in the study, Mrs. Harker having gone to bed, we discussed the attempts and discoveries of the day. Harker was the only one who had any result, and we are in great hopes that his clue may be an important one. Before going to bed, I went round to the patient's room and looked in through the observation trap. He was sleeping soundly, and his chest rose and fell with regular respiration. This morning, the man on duty reported to me that a little after midnight he was restless and kept saying his prayers somewhat loudly. I asked him if that was all. He replied that it was all he heard. There was something about his manner so suspicious that I asked point-blank if he had been asleep. He denied sleep, but admitted to having dozed for a while. It is too bad that men cannot be trusted unless they are watched. Today, Harker is out following up his clue, and Art and Quincy are looking after horses. Goldming thinks that it will be well to have horses always in readiness, for when we get the information which we seek, there will be no time to lose. We must sterilize all the important earth between sunrise and sunset. We shall thus catch the Count at his weakest, and without refuse to fly too. Van Helsing is off to the British Museum, looking up some authorities on ancient medicine. The old physicians took account of things which their followers do not accept, and the professor is searching for witch and demon cures which may be useful later. I sometimes think we must be all mad, and that we shall wake to sanity in strait waistcoats. Later. We have met again. We seem at last to be on track, and our work of tomorrow may be the beginning of the end. I wonder if Renfield's quiet has anything to do with this. His moods have followed the doings of the Count, but the coming destruction of the monster may be carried to him in some subtle way. If we could only get some hint as to what passed in his mind between the time of my argument with him yesterday and his resumption of fly-catching, it might afford us a valuable clue. He is now seemingly quiet for a spell. Is he? That wild yell seemed to come from his room. The attendant came bursting into my room and told me that Renfield had somehow met with some accident. He had heard him yell, and, when he went to him, found him laying on his face on the floor, all covered with blood. I must go at once. Chapter 21, Dr. Seward's Diary, 3 October. Let me put down with exactness all that happened, as well as I can remember it. Since last I made an entry. Not a detail that I can recall must be forgotten. In all calmness I must proceed. When I came to Renfield's room, I found him lying on the floor on his left side in a glittering pool of blood. When I went to move him, it became at once apparent that he had received some terrible injuries. There seemed none of that apparent, that he had a unity of purpose between the parts of the body which marks even lethargic sanity. As the face was exposed, I could see that it was horribly bruised, as though it had been beaten against the floor. Indeed, it was from the face wounds that the pool of blood originated. The attendant, who was kneeling beside the body, said to me, as we turned him over, "I think, sir, his back is broken. See, both his right arm and leg and the whole side of his face are paralyzed." How such a thing could have happened puzzled the attendant beyond measure. He seemed quite bewildered, and his brows were gathered in as he said, "I can't understand the two things. He could mark his face like that by beating his own head on the ground. I saw a young woman do it once at the Eversfield Asylum before anyone could lay hands on her, and I suppose he might have broke his back by falling out of bed if he got in an awkward kink. But for the life of me I can't imagine how the two things occurred. If his back was broke, he couldn't beat his head, and if his face was like that before the fall out of bed, there would be marks of it." I said to him, "Go to Dr. Van Helsing and ask him to kindly come here at once. I want him without any instant's delay." The man ran off, and with a very few minutes the professor, in his evening dress gown and slippers, appeared. When he saw Renfield on the ground, he looked keenly at him a moment and then turned to me. I think he recognized my thought in my eyes, for he said very quietly, manifestly for the ears of the attendant, "Ah, sad accident. He will need very careful watching and much attention. I shall stay with you myself, but I shall first dress myself. If you will remain, I shall in a few minutes join you." The patient was now breathing stertorously, and it was easy to see that he had suffered some terrible injury. Van Helsing returned with extraordinary clarity, bearing with him a surgical case. He had evidently been thinking, and had his mind made up, for, almost before he looked at the patient, he whispered to me, "Send the attendant away. We must be alone with him when he becomes conscious after the operation." So I said, "I think that will do now, Simons. We have done all that we can at present. You had better go your round, and Dr. Van Helsing will operate. Let me know instantly if there's anything unusual anywhere." The man withdrew and went into a strict examination of the patient. The wounds of the face were superficial. The real injury was a depressed fracture of the skull, extending right up through the motor area. The professor thought a moment and said, "We must reduce the pressure and get back to the normal conditions as far as can be. The rapidity of the suffusion shows the terrible cause of his injuries. The whole motor area seems affected. The suffusion of the brain will increase quickly, so we must transfer at once, or it may be too late." As he was speaking, there was a soft tapping at the door. I went over and opened it, and found in the corridor without Arthur and Quincy in pyjamas and slippers. The former spoke. "I heard your call up Dr. Helsing and tell him of an accident, so I woke Quincy, or rather called for him, as he was not asleep. Things are moving too quickly and too strangely for sleep for any of us these times. I've been thinking that tomorrow night we'll not see things as they have been. We'll have to look back and forward a little more than we have done. May we come in?" I nodded and held the door open till they had entered. Then I closed it again. When Quincy saw the attitude and state of the patient and noted the horrible pool on the floor, he said softly, "My God, what has happened to him? Poor devil." I told him briefly, and added that we expected he would recover consciousness after the operation. For a short time, at all events. He went at once and sat down on the edge of the bed, with Goldeming beside him. We all watched in patience. "We shall wait," said Dr. Van Helsing, "just long enough to fix the best spot for transferring, so that we may most quickly and perfectly remove the blood clot, for it is evident that the hemorrhage is increasing." The minutes during which we waited passed with fearful slowness. I had a horrible sinking in my heart, and from Van Helsing's face I gathered that he felt some sort of apprehension as to what was to come. I dreaded the words that Renfield might speak. I was positively afraid to think, but the conviction of what was coming was on me, as I have read of men who have heard the death watch. The poor man's breathing came in uncertain gasps. Each instant he seemed as though he would open his eyes and speak, but then would follow a prolonged, stertorous breath, and he would relapse into a more fixed insensibility. Inured, as I was, to sick beds and death, this suspense grew and grew upon me. I could almost hear the beating of my own heart, and the blood surging through my temples sounded like blows from a hammer. The silence finally became agonizing. I looked at my companions one after another, and saw from their flushed faces and damp brows that they were enduring equal torture. There was a nervous suspense over us all, as though, overheard, some dread bell would peal out powerfully when we should least expect it. At least there came a time when it was evident that the patient was sinking fast. He might die at any moment. I looked up at the professor and caught his eyes fixed on mine. His face was sternly set as he spoke. There is no time to lose. His words would be worth many lives. I've been thinking so as I stood here. It may be there is a soul at stake. We shall operate just above the ear. Without another word, he made the operation. For a few moments, the breathing continued to be stertorous. Then there came a breath, so prolonged that it seemed as though it would tear open his chest. Suddenly his eyes opened, and became fixed in a wild, helpless stare. This was continued for a few moments, then it softened into a glad surprise, and from the lips came a sigh of relief. He moved convulsively, and as he did so, said, "I'll be quiet, doctor. Tell them to take off the strait waistcoat. I've had a terrible dream, and it has left me so weak that I cannot move. What's wrong with my face? It feels all swollen, and it smarts dreadfully." He tried to turn his head, but even the effort, his eyes seemed to grow glassy again, so I gently put it back. Then Van Helsing said in a quiet, grave tone, "Tell us your dream, Mr. Renfield." As he heard the voice, his face brightened through its mutilation, and he said, "That is Dr. Van Helsing. How good it is of you to be here. Give me some water, my lips are dry, and I shall try to tell you. I dreamed—" He stopped and seemed fainting. I called quickly to Quincy, "The brandy!" "It is in my study, quick!" He flew and returned with a glass, the decanter of brandy, and a carafe of water. We moistened the parched lips, and the patient quickly revived. It seemed, however, that his poor injured brain had been working in the interval, for, when he was quite conscious, he looked at me piercingly with an agonized confusion, which I shall never forget, and said, "I must not deceive myself. It was no dream, but all a grim reality." Then his eyes roved round the room. As they caught sight of the two figures sitting patiently on the edge of the bed, he went on, "If I were not sure already, I should know from them." For an instant his eyes closed, not with pain or sleep, but voluntarily, as though he were bringing all his full faculties to bear. When he opened them, he said hurriedly, and with more energy than he had been yet displaying, "Quick, doctor, quick, I'm dying. I feel that I have but a few minutes, and then I must go back to death, or worse. Wet my lips with brandy again. I have something that I must say before I die, or before my poor crushed brain dies anyhow. Thank you. It was that night after you left me, when I implored you to let me go away. I couldn't speak then, for I felt my tongue was tied. But I was as sane then, except in that way, as I am now. I was in an agony of despair for a long time after you left me. It seemed hours. Then there came a sudden peace to me. My brain seemed to become cool again, and I realized where I was. I heard the dogs bark behind our house, but not where he was. As he spoke, Van Helsing's eyes never blinked, but his hand came out and met mine, gripping it hard. He did not, however, betray himself. He nodded slightly and said, "Go on." In a low voice, Renfield proceeded. He came up to the window in the mist, as I had seen him often before, but he was solid then, not a ghost, and his eyes were fierce like a man's when angry. He was laughing with his red mouth, the sharp white teeth glinting in the moonlight. when he turned to look back over the belt of trees to where the dogs were barking. I wouldn't ask him to come in at first, though I knew he wanted to, just as he had wanted all along. Then he began promising me things, not in words, but by doing them. He was interrupted by a word from the professor. How? My baking them happened just as he used to send in the flies when the sun was shining. Great big fat ones with steel and sapphire on their wings, and big moths in the night, with skull and crossbones on their backs. Van Helsing nodded to him as he whispered to me unconsciously. The Acarantia, suppose, of the Sphinxes, what you call the death's head's moth. The patient went on without stopping. Then he began to whisper, rats, 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 hundreds, thousands, millions of them, and every one alive. And the dogs eat them, and the cats too, all lives, all red blood, with years of life in it, and not merely buzzing flies. I laughed at him, for I wanted to see what he could do. Then the dogs howled, away beyond the dark trees in his house. He beckoned me to the window. I got up and looked out, and he raised his hands and seemed to call out without using any words. A dark mass spread over the grass, coming on like the shape of a flame of fire, and then he moved the mist to the night and left. I could see that there were thousands of rats with my eyes blazing red, like his, only smaller. He held up his hands, and they all stopped, and I thought he seemed to be saying, all these lives will I give you, I, and many more and greater through countless ages, if you will fall down and worship me. And then a red cloud, like the color of blood, seemed to close over my eyes, and before I knew what was going on, I found myself opening the sash and saying to him, come in, Lord and Master. The rats were all gone, but he slid into the room through the sash, though it was only open an inch wide, just as the moon herself has often come through the tiniest crack, and has stood before me in all her size and splendor. His voice was weaker, so I moistened his lips with the brandy again, and he continued, but it seemed as though his memory had gone on working in the interval, for his story was further advanced. I was about to call him back to the point, but Van Helsing whispered to me, let him go on. Do not interrupt him. He cannot go back, and maybe could not proceed at all if once he lost the thread of his thought. He proceeded. All day I waited to hear from him, but he did not send me anything, not even a blowfly, and when the moon got up I was pretty angry with him. When he slid through the window, though it was shut, and did not even knock, I got mad with him. He sneered at me, and his white face looked out of the mist, with his red eyes gleaming. And he went on as though he owned the whole place, and I was no one. He didn't even smell the same as he went by me. I couldn't hold him. I thought that, somehow, Mrs. Hawker had come into the room. Two men sitting on the bed stood up and came over, standing behind him so that he could not see them, but where they could hear better. They were both silent, but the professor started and quivered his face, however, grew grimmer and sterner still. Renfield went on without noticing. When Mrs. Hawker came in to see me this afternoon, she wasn't the same. It was like tea after the teapot had been watered. Here we all moved, but no one said a word, and he went on. I didn't know that she was there till she spoke, and she didn't look the same. I don't care for the pale people. I like them with lots of blood in them, and hers had all seemed to have run out. I didn't think of it at the time, but when she went away I began to think, and it made me mad to know that he had been taking the life out of her. I could feel the rest quivered, as I did, but we remained otherwise still. So, when he came tonight, I was ready for him. I saw the mist stealing in, and I grabbed it tight. I had heard that madmen have unnatural strength, and as I knew I was a madman, at times anyhow, I resolved to use my power, and he felt it too, for he had to come out of the mist to struggle with me. I held tight, and I thought I was going to win, for I didn't mean him to take any more of her life, till I saw his eyes. They burned into me, and my strength became like water. He slipped through it, and when I tried to cling to him, he raised me up and flung me down. There was a red cloud before me, and a noise like thunder, and the mist seemed to steal away under the door. His voice was becoming fainter, and his breath more strenuous. Van Helsing stood up instinctively. "We know the worst now," he said. "He is here, and we know his purpose. It may not be too late. Let us be armed, the same as we were the other night, but lose no time. There is not an instant to spare." There was no need to put our fear, nay, our conviction into words. We shared them in common. We all hurried and took from our rooms the same things that we had when we entered the Count's house. The professor had his ready, and as we met in the corridor, he pointed to them significantly as he said, "They never leave me, and they shall not till this unhappy business is over. Be wise also, my friends. It is no common enemy that we deal with, alas. Alas, that dear Madamina should suffer." He stopped. His voice was breaking, and I do not know if rage or terror predominated in my own heart. Outside the Harkers' door we paused. Art and Quincy held back, and the latter said, "Should we disturb her?" "We must," said Van Helsing grimly. "If the door be locked, I shall break it in." "May it not frighten her terribly. It is unusual to break into a lady's room," Van Helsing said solemnly. "You are always right, but this is life and death. All chambers are alike to the doctor, and even were they not, they are all as one to me tonight. Friend John, when I turn the handle, if the door does not open, do you put your shoulder down and shove, and you too, my friends, now." He turned the handle as he spoke, but the door did not yield. We threw ourselves against it. With a crash it burst open, and we almost fell headlong into the room. The professor did actually fall, and I saw across him as he gathered himself up from the hands and knees. What I saw appalled me. I felt my hair rise like bristles on the back of my neck, and my heart seemed to stand still. The moonlight was so bright that through the thick yellow blind of the room the light was enough to see. On the bed beside the window lay Jonathan Harker, his face flushed and breathing heavily as though in a stupor. Kneeling on the near edge of the bed facing outwards was the white-clad figure of his wife. By her side stood a tall, thin man, clad in black. His face was turned from us, but the instant we saw it, we all recognized the Count in every way, even the scar on his forehead. With his left hand he held both Mrs. Harker's hands, keeping them away with her arms at full tension. His right hand gripped her by the back of the neck, forcing her face down on his bosom. Her white nightdress was smeared with blood, and a thin stream trickled down the man's bare breast, which was shown by his torn open dress. The attitude of the two had a terrible resemblance of a child forcing a kitten's nose into a saucer of milk to compel it to drink. As we burst into the room, the Count turned his face, and the hellish look that I had heard described seemed to leap into it. His eyes flamed red with devilish passion. The great nostrils of the white aquiline nose opened wide and quivered at the edges, and the white sharp teeth behind the full lips of the blood-dripping mouth champed together like those of a wild beast. With a winch which threw his victim back upon the bed as though hurled from a height, he turned and sprang at us, but by this time the professor had gained his feet and was holding towards him the envelope which contained the sacred wafer. The Count suddenly stopped, just as poor Lucy had done outside the tomb, and cowered back. Further, excuse me, further back he cowered, as we, lifting our crucifixes, advanced. The moonlight suddenly fell as a great black cloud sailed across the sky. And when the gaslight sprang up under... Excuse me, guys. Sorry, I gotta take a drink. Dang it. We saw nothing but faint vapor. Hold on, I'm gonna mute this. This, as we looked, trailed under the door, which with the recoil from its bursting open had swung back to its old position. Van Helsing, Art, and I moved forward to Mrs. Harker, who by this time had drawn her breath, and with it had given a scream so wild, so ear-piercing, so despairing, that it seems to me now that it will ring in my ears till my dying day. For a few seconds she lay in her helpless attitude and disarrayed. Her face was ghastly, with a pallor which was accentuated by the blood which smeared her lips and cheeks and chin. From her throat trickled a thin stream of blood. Her eyes were mad with terror. Then she put before her face her poor crushed hands, which bore on their witness the red mark of the Count's terrible grip, and from behind them came a low desolate wail which made the terrible scream seem only the quick expression of an endless grief. Van Helsing stepped forward and drew the coverlet gently over her body, whilst Art, after looking at her face for an instant despairingly, ran out of the room. Van Helsing whispered to me, "Jonathan is in a stupor such as we know the vampire can produce. We can do nothing with the poor Madam Mina for a few moments till she recovers herself. I must wake him." He dipped the end of the towel in cold water, and with it began to flick him on the face, his wife all the while holding her face between her hands and sobbing in a way that was heartbreaking to hear. I raised the blind and looked out of the window. There was much moonshine, and as I looked I could see Quincy Morris run across the lawn and hide himself in the shadow of a great yew tree. It puzzled me to think why he was doing this, but at the instant I heard Harker's quick exclamation as he woke partial consciousness and turned to the bed. On his face, as there might well be, was a look of wild amazement. He seemed dazed for a few seconds, and then full consciousness seemed to burst upon him all at once, and he started up. His wife was aroused by the quick movement and turned to him with her arms stretched out as though to embrace him. Instantly, however, she drew them in again, and putting her elbows together, held her hands before her face, and shuddered till the bed beneath her shook. "In God's name, what does this mean?" Harker cried out. "Dr. Seward, Dr. Van Helsing, what is it? What has happened? What is wrong? Mina, dear, what is it? What does that blood mean? My God, has it come to this?" And raising himself to his knees, he beat his hands wildly together. "Good God, help us! Help her! Oh, help her!" With a quick movement, he jumped from bed and began to pull on his clothes. All the men in him awake to the need for instant exertion. "What has happened? Tell me all about it," he cried without pausing. "Dr. Van Helsing, you love me, I know. Oh, do something to save her. I cannot have gone too far yet. Guard her while I look for him." His wife, through her terror and horror and distress, saw some sure danger to him. Instantly forgetting her own grief, she seized hold of him and cried out, "No, no, Jonathan, you must not leave me. I've suffered enough tonight, God knows, without the dread of his harming you. You must stay with me. Stay with these friends who will watch over you." Her expression became frantic as she spoke, and as he yielded to her, she pulled him down, sitting on the bedside, and clung to him fiercely. Van Helsing and I tried to calm them both. The professor held up his little golden crucifix and said with wonderful calmness, "Do not fear, my dear. We are here, and whilst this is close to you, no foul thing can approach. Are you safe for tonight? And we must be calm to take counsel together." She shuddered and was silent, holding down her head on her husband's breast. When she raised it, his white night-robe was stained with blood where her lips had touched, and where the thin wound in her neck had sent forth drops. The instant she saw it, she drew back with a low wail and whispered amidst choking sobs, "Unclean, unclean! I must touch him and kiss him no more. Oh, that should be, that is, I who am now his worst enemy, and whom he may have most cause to fear." To this he spoke out resolutely. "Nonsense, Mina! It is a shame to me to hear such a word. I would not hear it of you, and I shall not hear it from you. May God judge me by the deserts, and punish me with more bitter suffering than ever this hour, if by any act or will of mine anything ever come between us." He put out his arms and folded her to his breast, and for a while she lay there sobbing. He looked at us over her bowed head, with eyes that blinked damply above his quivering nostrils. His mouth was set as still. After a while her sobs became less frequent and more faint. And then he said to me, speaking with a studied calmness which I felt tried his nervous power to the utmost, "And now, Dr. Seward, tell me all about it. Too well I know the broad fact. Tell me all that has been." I told him exactly what had happened, and he listened with seeming impassiveness. But his nostrils twitched and his eyes blazed as I told him the ruthless hands of the Count had held his wife in that terrible and horrible position, with her mouth too open wound in his breast. It interested me, even at that moment, to see that whilst the face of the white passion worked convulsively over the bowed head, the hands tenderly and lovingly stroked the ruffled hair. Just as I had finished, Quincy and Goldman knocked at the door. They entered in obedience to our summons. Van Helsing looked at me questioningly. I understood him to mean if we were to take advantage of their coming to divert, if possible, the thoughts of the unhappy husband and wife from each other and from themselves. So, on my nodding acquiescence to him, he asked them what they had seen or done, to which Lord Godalming answered, "I could not see him anywhere in the passage or in any of our rooms. I looked in the study, but though he had been there, he had gone. He had, however—" He stopped suddenly, looking at the poor, drooping figure on the bed. Van Helsing said gravely, "Go on, friend Arthur. We want no more concealments. Our hope now is in knowing all. Tell freely." So Art went on. "He had been there, and though it could only have been for a few seconds, he made rare hay of the place. All the manuscript had been burned, and the blue flames were flickering amongst the white ashes. The cylinders of your phonograph, too, were thrown on the fire, and the wax had helped the flames." Here I interrupted. "Thank God there's the other copy in the safe." His face lit for a moment, but fell again as he went on. "I ran downstairs then, but I could see no sign of him. I looked into Renfield's room, but there was no trace there except—" Again he paused. "Go on," said Harker hoarsely. So he bowed his head and moistened his lips with his tongue, and added, "Except that poor fellow is dead." Mrs. Harker raised her head, looking from one to the other of us as she said solemnly, "God's will be done." I could not but feel that Art was keeping back something, as I took it that it was with a purpose. I said nothing. Van Helsing turned to Morris and asked, "And you, friend Quincy, have you any to tell?" "A little," he answered. "It may be much eventually, but at present I can't say I thought it will be well to know, if possible, where the Count would go when he left the house. I did not see him, but I saw a bat rise from Winfield's window and flap westward. I expected to see him in some shape go back to Carfax, but he evidently sought some other lair. He will not be back tonight, for the sky is reddened in the grass, and the dawn is close. We must work tomorrow." He said the latter words through his shut teeth. For a space of perhaps a couple of minutes there was silence, and I could fancy that I could hear the sound of our hearts beating. Then Van Helsing said, placing his hand over very tenderly on Mrs. Harker's head, "And now, Madam Mina, poor dear, dear Madam Mina, tell us exactly what happened." God knows that I do not want that you be pained, but it is need that we know all. For now more than ever has all work to be done quick and sharp, and in deadly earnest. The day is close to us, and must end all, if it may be so, and now the chance that we may live and learn. The poor dear lady shivered, and could see the tension of her nerves as she clasped her husband's closer to her and bent her head lower and lower still on his breast. Then she raised her head proudly and held out one hand to Van Helsing, who took it in his, and, after stooping and kissing it reverently, held it fast. The other hand was locked in that of her husband, who held his other arm thrown round her protectingly. After a pause, in which she was evidently ordering her thoughts, she began. I took the sleeping draught which you had so kindly given me, but for a long time it did not act. I seemed to become more wakeful, and myriads of horrible fancies began to crowd in upon my mind, all of them connected with death, and vampires, with blood and pain and trouble. Her husband involuntarily grouched as she turned to him and said lovingly, Do not fret, dear. You must be brave and strong and help me through the horrible task. If you only knew what an effort it is to me to tell this fearful thing at all, you would understand how much I need your help. But I saw I must try to help the medicine do its work with my will, if it was to do me any good, so I resolutely set myself to sleep. Sure enough, sleep must soon have come to me, for I remembered no more. Jonathan coming in had not waked me, for he lay by my side when next I remember. There was in the room the same thin white mist that I had before noticed, but I forgot now. If you know this, you will find it in my diary, which I shall show you later. I felt the same vague terror which had come to me before, the same sense of some presence. I turned to wake Jonathan, but found that he slept so soundly that it seemed as if he was he who had taken the sleeping draught, and not I. I tried but could not wake him. This caused me a great fear, and I looked around terrified. Then, indeed, my heart sank within me beside the bed, as if he had stepped out of the mist, or rather as if the mist had turned into this figure, for it had entirely disappeared. Stood a tall man, thin man, all in black. I knew him at once from the descriptions of the others, the waxen face, the high aquiline nose, on which the light fell on a thin white line, the parted red lips with the sharp white teeth showing between, and the red eyes that had seemed to see in the sunset on the windows of St. Mary's Church at Whitby. I knew, too, the red scar on his forehead where Jonathan had struck him. For an instant my heart stood still, and I would have screamed out, only that I was paralyzed. In the pause he spoke in a sort of keen-cutting whisper, pointing as he spoke to Jonathan. Silence. If you make a sound, I shall take him and dash his brains out before your very eyes. I was appalled and was too bewildered to do or say anything. With a mocking smile he placed one hand upon my shoulder, and holding me tight, bared my throat with the other, saying as he did so, First, a little refreshment to reward my exertions. You may as well be quiet. It is not the first time, or the second, that your veins have appeased my thirst. I was bewildered, and strangely enough, I did not want to hinder him. I suppose it is a part of the horrible curse that this happens when his touch is on his victim. And oh, my God, pity me. He placed his reeking lips upon my throat. Her husband groaned again. She clasped his hand harder, and looked at him pityingly, as if he were the injured one, and went on. I felt my strength fading away, and I was in a half-swoon. How long this horrible thing lasted I know not, but it seemed that a long time must have passed before he took his foul, awful, sneering mouth away. I saw it drip with fresh blood. The remembrance seemed for a while to overpower her, and she dropped and drooped, and would have sunk down, but for her husband's sustaining arm. With a great effort, she recovered herself and went on. Then he spoke to me mockingly. And so you, like the others, would play your brains against me? You would help these men to hunt me and frustrate me in my designs. You know now, and they know in part already, and will know in full before long, what it is to cross my path. They should have kept their energies for use closer to home, whilst they play wits against me, who commanded nations and intrigued for them, and fought for them hundreds of years before they were born. I was countermining them, and you, their best beloved one, are now to me flesh of my flesh, blood of my blood, kin of my kin, my bountiful winepress for a while, and shall be later on my companion and my helper. You shall be avenged in turn, for not one of them but shall minister to your needs. But as yet you are to be punished for what you have done. You have aided in thwarting me. Now you shall come to my call. When my brains say come, to you should cross land or sea to do my bidding, and to that end this. With that, he pulled open his shirt, and with his long sharp nails opened a vein in his breast. When the blood began to spurt out, he took his hands at one of his, holding them tight, and with the other seized my neck and pressed my mouth to the wound, so that I must either suffocate or swallow some of the— oh my God, what have I done? What have I done to deserve such a fate? I, who have tried to walk in the meekness and righteousness all my days. God pity me. Look down on a poor soul in a worse than mortal peril, and in mercy pity those whom she is dear. Then she began to rub her lips as though to cleanse them from pollution. As she was telling her terrible story, the eastern sky began to quicken, and everything became more and more clear. Parker was still and quiet, but over his face, as the awful narrative went on, came a grey look which deepened and deepened in the morning light. But when the first red streak of the coming dawn shot up, the flesh stood darkly out against the whitening hair. We have arranged that one of us is to stay within call of the unhappy pair till we can meet together and arrange about taking action. Of this I am sure the sun rises today on no more miserable house in all the great round of its daily courses. On that note, boys and girls, we are going to go to our second music break. On this break, we have Gravity from Krakow, Poland with My Last Goodbye, Fred Johnson III from Canyon County, California with After Dark, Dan Medina from Krakow, Poland as well, originally a member of Gravity with I Won't Let You Go, Prime Example with our host, Roy Washington, who is our musical host and gives us all of our music with Power Play. And then we have Mr. Jeff Hilliard from Los Angeles, California with Consensual Sex Van. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this music break.
Here I am. things calmly unsaid. Streets of these high going to dead end. Listening to waves on windy days. Standing by the wall, making sense of it all. So alone in the dark, all alone in the dark, all alone in the dark. You're alone in the dark. 'Cause I won't let you go. You're so far away, always with my soul. I won't let you go. Oh, you're so far away, always with me in my soul. Yeah, yeah. Looking for a reason, not a lead. Mystified, lives inside a world selling us all. Oh, she's alone in the dark, all alone in the dark, all alone in the dark, so alone in the dark. 'Cause I won't let you go. I won't let you go. You're so far away, always with me in my soul. Yeah, yeah. And I won't let you go. And I won't let you go.
Once upon a lifetime, was a man in your hood. Tricked, misguided, and misunderstood. Till one day he cried out, Lord, save me. Teach me the lessons of life, won't you raise me? Because I tried everything under my hat, and I found all my plans were tears hanging white. I need a hero, a real life camaraderie, to step in, receive me, and deliver a power play. Something to raise my head from the dust. It's the must. I find someone in whom I can trust. I must grow in knowledge, live what I learn. I'm so glad to meet you, yo, my name is Vern. Lead me any way that you're willing and I'll share. I need your power play. Yeah, here comes another one. It's so good to be clothed in your right mind. Dreams to the front and all past behind. Memories of things you did so absurd. Came to the curb, now heard was the word. Cause often we're low now, problems can grind us. But with power from God, yeah, we all still victorious. Listen to the seed, the knowledge and digest the rhythm. Because a trooper like Jay keeps it righteous. And express upon the example of a vocalist, adjust your bubble. Leroy is like dangerous trouble. Trouble if you want it, peace if you with it. Never before known of a man who can stand it, but so irrelevant. So kick it in if you will, Lord. And I'll shield. I need your power play. Yeah, here comes another one. Expressing power for the knowledge, and now you're not guessing. When power meets the darkness, the devil's got you go. That's my Weasel, and now he's going loco. If you got a problem, God can solve it. Power from the churro, and you're in his outfit. Why must the fish stay dirty so filthy? Get off your rear and whitewash the pickings. Power for cleansing, power for sanitizing, power for us, power for the rising of the sun. Cause in your darkest hour, you can look up and express to feel the power up. I need your power play. Yeah. Comes another one.
Do you wanna go for a ride in my consensual sex van? Do you wanna go for a ride in my consensual sex van? Let me take you far away from all this huff and puff. There will be nothing in between our love, like a pair of doves flying high above, where nothing can touch us, touching softly. Don't let me go, I won't let you go. This is eternity with me, baby. Do you wanna go for a ride in my consensual sex van? Do you wanna go for a ride in my consensual sex van? You don't have to be magic, healthy laughter, boundaries, safe space, unknowing mutual consent, passion, happily we'll be bearing our souls, naked by the sea. We'll breathe the clean air. We'll be living, laughing, loving forever. Baby, do you wanna go for a ride in my consensual sex van? Do you wanna go for a ride in my consensual sex van? You don't have to be alone anymore. We will be together forever in love. Do you wanna go for a ride? Do you wanna go in my consensual? Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Just get in the van.
Just get in the van. I got some free candy. Welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us this evening on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. So, this evening, we have delved into Bram Stokers' Dracula. We're going to end our 3-hour tour with some Reddit ghost stories. Be ghost story or dream. Years ago, my husband and I traveled out of town so he could do some testing for the police department. We stayed the night in a Ramada Inn, I believe, in San Luis Obispo, California. The plan was for him to wake up early and go do the test, and I was to hang out in the room until he was done. We arrived at the hotel late. It actually looked like an old apartment building that they renovated into a hotel. I don't remember a lobby, just an office to get your room key. When we got to our room, we immediately got ready for bed since it would be an early day for my husband. We had just laid down and turned off the light. My husband can fall asleep fast where I have to relax a bit. Well, it had only been a few minutes and he suddenly screams out. He scared the crap out of me. I asked him what was wrong with him and he said he felt like he was being choked. He was so tired, though, that he just told me kind of quietly and then fell back to sleep. I honestly don't think much of it. He recently just came back from deployment in Iraq, and bad dreams, night terrors were happening a lot. Early the next morning, he left, and I stayed sleeping in the bed. I was in a state of sleeping but awake. I kept thinking I should get up and get ready, but I was so tired. Then I started to dream that there were two people in the room with me, an older couple. She had on a house coat, aka robe, and slippers with her hair in curlers. He had on a tank top with boxers, black socks, and those suspender things that hold your socks up. There was a suitcase at the bottom of the bed by my feet, an old-fashioned hard suitcase. It was open and laying flat, and they were packing it up. I kept thinking, why can't they see me here? I literally could see and feel the bed moving and hearing them talking, etc. Eventually, I must have woken up and gotten in the shower. I felt so uneasy the whole time getting ready. I felt so uncomfortable that I eventually propped open my hotel room door just to hear some outside noise. My husband came back and we left. Later that day at the family barbecue, I overheard my husband telling his uncle that he didn't sleep well. He said he kept dreaming that he was being choked and yelled at by a man. He was laughing with his uncle and saying the guy was so old and wore sock suspenders. I got sudden goosebumps and went over and asked him what he looked like again. I told him my story and we all just stood there creeped out. I thought I was dreaming and so did he, but we both saw the same old couple. Still creeps me out to this day. Haunted Wardrobe. This is by user /trousers _called _Dave. Haunted Wardrobe. Years back, me and my nan were just sitting there watching TV when we heard a really loud bang above us. We went up to look and found my wardrobe had fallen onto my bed. It didn't just fall though, it moved about 2 feet forward, then turned sideways and fell, doors open, down onto my bed. My nan decided to smash it up and chuck it out in the garden for my granddad to remove because she didn't want to take any chances of it happening again. No idea why or how it happened, but I'm glad that I wasn't in bed because I would have been bloody hurt. Bloody hell. Could you imagine? This one is by user /never_apologize. Ghost on the stairs. Encounter. Disclaimer. I am not a believer, but I have had 2 experiences which make me stop and think this is the first. During my early 20s, I worked security for a few years. A construction company had contracted the company I worked for. It was our job to provide 24/7 on-site security for a closed-down building, formerly an insane asylum. The construction company was tasked to upgrade it to reopen it for a newly refurbished psych ward. They had a monitor room set up inside the building where we sat while not patrolling the grounds. It covered the entirety of the building's exterior. I got used to weird things happening, could most of the time explain them away. Christmas Eve, around 2 a.m., I was patrolling the exterior of the building when off in the distance I saw someone walk up the stairs onto a landing. I called out and they looked back at me, then continued going up the stairs. By the time I got from where I was across to and up to the stairs, they were gone. No one to be seen. But I've never felt more uncomfortable in my entire life standing on that landing. I felt like 100 pairs of eyes were piercing my body. It almost physically hurt. I quickly finished my exterior patrol, went back to the monitor room, and checked out the tape. Nothing. Nobody was there. I saw this person turn and look at me while I was out there, so why was there anyone else besides me on that camera? I refused to go back there again after that night. This one is by user /Illustra J. She saw it too. When I was maybe 9 or 10 years old, my mom left us with a babysitter and went out for the evening. We played games, watched TV, and eventually went back to bed. This is where I saw a ghost / monster / creepy being. As I lay in bed, this horrible feeling started to wash over me. I looked into the hall and saw a large, swamp-covered being walking down the hallway. It stopped for a moment and seemed to look at me, and then continued down the hall. I stayed in bed, terrified and trying to convince myself that it was in my head. Sometime later, my mom came home, and I heard her asking the babysitter if everything went well. The babysitter said we were fine and all was well, but that she was freaked out because while she was lying on the couch, she could have sworn that she saw a large swamp-covered ghost walking down the hall. OMG, she saw it too. There is no way for me to convince myself it was my imagination. I hated that house from that day forward and was so glad when we moved. I never saw the swamp ghost again, but that experience still haunts me to this day. This one is by user /stupidfwog. Goat's Hands. Well, this happened a few years ago, 2019, I think. I, at the time, was living in an apartment with my mom and brother in Minnesota, and I was just about to move back home. We'd only moved to Minnesota for 2 years, and this was the last year. We lived on the second floor in this apartment building in a very small town in Minnesota. Maybe it's Maine. I think it's Maine. My bedroom window faced the cornfield across the street, and our street had literally no street lights on it. The closest thing to a street light was the apartment sign that had those lights on it that highlighted the sign at night. There was a neighborhood right next to our apartment building, and that was the only neighborhood for a little bit. Like I said, small town in Minnesota. One night, like the same week that I moved back to my home state, I was sitting at my patio in front of my bedroom window when I saw something poking its head out of the corn across the street. Like I said, there were no street lights, but the apartment highlighting lights were those bright white kind, so I was able to see it was a black goat just sticking his head out of the corn. It was odd, but the cornfield belonged to a farm, so I just figured one of the goats had escaped. I go back to my piano, doing whatever, when I get curious and I look up and see the goat is not in the middle of the street. It's facing my apartment building. It was probably around midnight when I saw this and naturally got creeped because earlier I had just finished watching some horror movie with my mom, so I get up, move to my bed just to be away from my window. About an hour goes by and my curiosity gets the better of me, and I got a peek out of my window and see the goat in the grass of my apartment complex. Because the goat was so much closer and in a better light from the apartment sign, I could see that instead of front hooves, this goat had hands, like human hands or humanish hands, coming right out of the goat's legs. He had gnarled-looking gray hands with long, skinny fingers that looked mangled and broken. Because I had just watched horror movies and had an overactive imagination, I tried to convince myself he wasn't there and just left my room. I was sleeping on the couch that night, y'all. The next fucking morning, I walk into my room and see his greasy handprint with long broken fingers on the outside of my window, with little black hair stuck to the grease on the second floor. I never saw the goat again before I moved, but earlier this year I had moved in with my boyfriend, and every now and then I moved in with him. I've had weird dreams, like vivid dreams, with the goat just hanging out in the background. Car crash dream, he's there on the side of the road. Camping dream, he's there, stalking in the background. And it's only the weird, spooky, vivid nightmarish dreams that he pops up in. The most vivid and spookiest of dreams happened last month. For whatever reason, I was in Salem, or a Salem-esque town, dressed in Puritan clothing and everything. It was a foggy night, and I could literally smell the rain and mold on the old wood buildings. I was in a field walking away from the woods towards town, and the goat was there just watching me walk away from him in the woods. My boyfriend literally had to wake me up because I was twitching so bad in my sleep, and I woke up cold like I had literally been standing in a foggy field in an old Salem town at night. I saw him once in real life, and now he's stalking my dreams. That is my little ghost story. Welcome back, champ. Hope you had a nice walk. Like I said earlier, it's pretty hot and humid here in Southwest Colorado. So this one is a short and sweet story, and it's by user/nada_alien. Hanging man outside my house. I was in my room, relaxing, when I looked outside my window and saw a fucking man in a noose. Immediately, I went out there and boom, gone. Was I hallucinating? Or did I see a damn dead guy? I couldn't tell you. This one is by user/double maintenance 880. What's happening on my farm? My farm has been in my family's name since 1798. It was built on an Indian burial ground. I know, it's always what people say, but I'm 100% serious. All throughout my childhood, I've heard stories passed down from my ancestors. Stories like our livestock disappearing, names being called from the tree line, the normal ghost stories you get told by the campfire. I always thought they were just that, stories, but something that happened yesterday changed my mind completely. While I was trying to sleep, watching Seinfeld, like I always do, the dog started to go crazy, which is pretty normal, but then I started to hear whimpers as soon as the scream started. It was like no scream I had ever heard. It was high-pitched and low-pitched at the same time. I immediately grabbed my 12 gauge and ran outside as fast as I could, but then everything just went still. No screaming, no barking. Hell, even the cicadas stopped chirping. It was the most terrifying quiet I have ever experienced. I turned on my phone light and started scanning the perimeter of the dog pen when I noticed whimpers from a tree line. It was a weird whisper, like it was beckoning me to come closer, but it was no language I could understand. As any sane person would do, I immediately ran inside and locked the doors and double-checked that the windows were locked. As soon as I got inside, all the noises started again, and the cicadas and the dogs and everything was normal. As I went upstairs, I had a terrible feeling of being watched, and I just couldn't sleep. I haven't slept since then, and I'm terrified of what may happen tonight. Someone please tell me what's going on. This one is by user/Nasium. 2 mediocre ghost stories. These might not be on par with all the other shit on this sub, but it's pretty cool. Last night, as of posting this, my grandma was going to bed and she distinctly remembers shutting the TV off. But at 2:35 a.m., she said she hears noises coming from the living room. The TV was on. It was on the local news channel. The remote was in the same spot. The TV is only 1 year old, so it can't be a technical error, but I don't know. In 2016, my cousins and I were at a reception at my aunt's wedding, and we made jokes about summoning ghosts and shit, so we find spells to summon ghosts online and we read them, and nothing happens for 5 seconds until the candles on each table go out. So, yeah, pretty mediocre, right? I don't know how many times we buffered tonight, but we just did right before those 2 mediocre ghost stories. This one is by user/a girl named Lizard. Like others, I'm starting a spooky podcast. Oh, well, good for you. Right. User/beginning-exam-387. She won't move on. Anybody else had experiences with people passing and then bad luck happening to you, one thing after another? My great aunt passed a couple months ago, and my parents are the ones to sort out the wills, selling of the houses, etc. Whenever they've gone there to sort bits out, weird or bad things happen to them. The loft hatch opening, swinging down and narrowly missing their heads. They left one day and got about 30 minutes down the road before they got a call to say water was dripping through the floor to the neighbor's ceiling, getting a blown-out tire on the way there, and then on the way back getting a crack on the windshield, then in their own home banging upstairs and big picture falling down. Sure could be a coincidence, but it seems to me that she does not want the house to go. This one is by user/Leia Renee. Scratched by a ghost. This happened about 1.5 years ago, and I will never forget it. Basically, Mom and I moved into our trailer a few years ago and knew that it was haunted within a couple of months. Our stuff would disappear and then reappear right next to us, and doors would open and slowly close on their own. But all that stopped after a couple months unless friends visit. When friends visit, the ghosts like to try to scare them. Despite knowing our house is haunted, we had no problems since the ghost never harmed us in any way until the day this happened. I was about 18 or 19 at the time. One of my friends and I were scraping wallpaper off my bedroom wall to paint it. Then my bedroom door, which was previously shut tight, suddenly swung open. My friend jumped up while I laughed and explained to her that ghosts in my house do that sometimes when I have friends over, but they never do any harm. Calmed down, but the door slowly started shutting and then suddenly opened again and again, so I told my friend that maybe it's time we took a break and got some food. While we were in the kitchen, I was looking through the cupboards when my friend, who still had the wallpaper scraper in her hand, said that if a ghost tried to attack her, she'd cut them. I told her not to threaten them because they've never harmed anyone, so there's no reason to threaten them for any reason. Then I stood at my kitchen sink to wash a dish, and suddenly I felt like my arm was burning. I looked down and saw several deep scratch marks on my arm. They looked like they spelled a word, but I couldn't tell what. Still have no idea what was trying to be spelled. I immediately put my arm under cold water to try to cool it down and called my friend over to look. So my friend put down the paper scraper, and then I sat on the couch and showed my friend and told her that's the reason why you never threaten ghosts. And it turned out that while I was showing her my arm at the sink, the scraper disappeared. My arm felt like it was on fire for so long that I had to wrap it up in tight bandages in order for it to stop hurting. I have a picture of my arm at the time if anyone wants me to post the picture in another post or something. This one is by user/Momchus. True paranormal experience of visiting a flat with someone, suicide inside. A few years ago, I became interested in purchasing some real estate as an investment and shared my new venture on social media. Zoe, my good friend from college, sent me a message asking me if I was interested in checking out a flat belonging to her in-laws. Excuse me. The building she's talking about was barely 2 years old and was located in a prestigious residential area. My friend told me that her in-laws bought it off the plan and it was meant for her husband's brother. He moved in, but a year ago, he suicided in that very flat. She didn't want to live there and told her in-laws to sell it. Zoe told me all this, and I said I didn't mind taking a look because a flat like this can usually be a pretty great bargain. The property where an unnatural death has occurred can often be bought for as much as 40% less than normal. However, my in-laws insist on selling it at regular market price because they don't consider suicide an unnatural death. Only manslaughter is unnatural, she said. Maybe I can convince them, I told her. That was my mistake. So my husband and I drove to the place at the appointed time. It was indeed a magnificent building, still had the new building smell of paint, and the furnishings were splendid. Zoe was at work and couldn't join me, so I met her in-laws by myself. They showed me around the flat and answered my questions. When I wanted to check out the main bathroom, they said it was where their son killed himself. He died in the bathtub. He died peacefully, no blood spilled. He used some drug that only medical staff can get. Zoe's mother-in-law said with a bitter smile, I didn't know what to answer, just opened the door, stepped inside, and took a look around before I got out. I thought to myself that this was indeed a good property. If the price were good, I wouldn't mind buying it. During the negotiation, the owners insisted that they wouldn't accept any price discount. After 10 minutes talking around and around, I knew I was wasting my time. I thanked them and I left. When I sat down in the car, I suddenly felt melancholy. For the time and gasoline I wasted for the limited budget I had for this cruel world, sad and negative feelings that I never felt before all rushed into my head. I tried my best to stay calm like nothing was happening, but inside my head I wanted to kill myself. No joking. After I got home, I tried to do something to cheer myself up. I started making some pastry as a way to keep myself occupied. About 20 minutes after I started baking, something strange happened. The sadness and the suicidal thought suddenly vanished, and I smelled cologne. I don't use perfume, and I was the only person in the kitchen. At that moment, I realized that the soul of Zoe's suicided brother-in-law must have followed me home. It's him who passed me the terrible thoughts and feelings which he had felt before he died, and the cologne must have been his. I couldn't keep this to myself, and I told my friend everything and told her not to think I'm crazy. Zoe said that she knew what I was talking about because she also smelled it. That's why she refuses to live there. That's why she and her husband would live there for just a few months until she insisted on moving out, no matter what it took. I I've had many other strange encounters in my life, but this experience was like a solid proof that I really can communicate with the other world. P.S. This is my cousin's true story, first published on highnews.cc. I got permission to repost it. This one is by, excuse me, user / Azathoth Sandlicker. Strange light. Not a very special story, but I have a series of bizarre lights hovering in strange locations, such as over a house or just below my ceiling my entire life. There are several constants in each light. They are always small, about the size of a golf ball, always red and always short-lived, about 5 to 10 second lifespans. I've always thought they were ghosts. This one is by user / UMSHH. I saw something floating, and this is marked as experience. This was a few years ago, but I never stopped thinking about what the fuck I saw. I was in a dance class staring at the floor. Suddenly, I see this sort of orb-looking thing slowly moving across the floor. I think, okay, weird, is that a light imprint in my eyes? So I looked away, blinking, but it didn't follow my vision. I looked back, and it was still moving along its path across the room. No hesitating as I blinked. As it reached the other side of the room, it disappeared into the wall. I tried several times to see anything like that by blinking and looking at them away from the lights. Nothing. It was something else. I've never since seen anything like it. The way it was gliding was so obscure. This one is by user / x@weirdox. My ghost encounter. So, me and my at the time boyfriend were 13. We lived in a not so great area. I lived across from a park that has woods where rape and rumors of murder have happened. I couldn't find records of this, but police have had been there plenty of times, and once has investigation taken the entrances. So we decided to go into there to mess around. I took my camera. I can't find the footage as it was stored on my last phone, but we had entered and we sat at a bench and placed my phone on a flipped bench so it could record us. We started to hear stuff around us, but we called it off as it's a public park until the phone had flew off the bench a meter or two, like it had been thrown even though we were there watching it. So of course we're freaked out, so as the kids we walked around to try to calm our nerves, and we had heard things and seen stuff out of our eyes, the usual story. So after about half an hour, we head home, and I reviewed the footage, and I found a shadow figure standing just watching us, fully black, no definition, just the outline of a body, a kid's face in a bush, voices and footsteps that wasn't ours. The main voice that we got sounded like a child laughing. This got me. In the same place as the shadow figure there was three, a smaller one, the same one as before, and one around the same height as the original. This was about 6-ish minutes after the first shadow. I'm currently trying to recover the footage, but the phone is battered and I don't know my Apple ID as I made it at 8. I believe it's not backed up anyway. I'll leave updates if I find footage. This one is by user /Lynn Kagamine _simp. Hey, you might remember me from my first post here, but oh, do I have a new can of worms. Alright, so I'm a female. I recently moved into an apartment with two other humans, and I've been having crazy hallucinations. Things are being thrown across the apartment. Food is being found rotten. Nobody took it out, and it wasn't supposed to rot. My apartment mates are having the same experiences as me, but they never have these problems before until I moved in. Could I be the problem? Perhaps she is haunted. You never know. This one is by user /GrayStag. Child's toy reacts to negative environment. Hi, y'all. This is something that terrified my sister and I when we were children. Of course, being children, we moved on from it about an hour later and played normally. But we never forgot the incident. And over the following years, we have each told various friends, etc. As a kid, I had all my toys up on a shelf in my bedroom. One of them was a barking dog toy, the robotic ones that bark and walk and flip over on a repeating loop. I'd had it for a long time and didn't use it anymore. My sister and I were arguing like cats and dogs. Whilst we got along sometimes, we had a very tumultuous relationship and would very often have big fits that, to us, were quite serious, and we would both hold grudges against each other and sometimes not talk for days. One day, in my bedroom, an argument sparked up between us. I can't for the life of me remember what it was about. It could have been anything. Anyway, the subject is not important. As usual, for us, the argument escalated and escalated until the point where we were both very angry and we were screaming furiously at each other. At that point, the dog on my shelf came to life. It started barking and walking. Obviously, we both shut up immediately and stared at it in disbelief. The dog continued to move, yapping away until it walked right off the edge of the shelf and landed on the floor. It lay on its side as its legs continued to wiggle, and it continued to yap for about 2 or 3 seconds, and then it stopped. I hadn't used the toy for a long time, so I had no idea if it was maybe malfunctioning or something. Even though we were both freaked out, my adrenaline was pumping, both from the arguing and the incident, and I didn't really hesitate to go over and pick it up. It was at this point I noticed the battery compartment was empty. It was the only power source to the toy. You couldn't charge it or anything. Furthermore, the switch was in the off position. Upon saying it to my sister, it switched off. We both freaked out and ran out of the room. We told our parents, but they weren't really interested, and it never happened again, so we just moved on. We were never disturbed by the incident or anything. We just never forgot it. It suddenly popped into my head, so I thought I'd share it here. I know it's not the scariest or spookiest story, but it's always seemed like a paranormal activity to me, so I hope you enjoyed reading it. This one is by user /midnight_madman86. Entity BFFs. Discussion. So, I have to know how many people out there have some sort of supernatural or otherworldly creature who's been following them around for decades. Others have confirmed same feeling both in negative and positive experience. Since I was a teenager, I've had an unknown thing that seems to have attached itself. Back in high school, my friends and I were into ghost hunting as well as occult practice. This thing has hurt people and also soothed I've had in my life throughout the years. When my ex was living with me, she would have nightmares as well as scratches, feeling like someone was pushing her or so on. My now wife would feel on edge and often not go throughout our old house alone. She would get lightheaded and dizzy. My wife is sensitive to things that go bump in the night. However, everything changed when she became pregnant, as well as the activity levels shooting up 100%. Speakers in the house would play lullabies, as well as the feeling of complete calm. But on the other hand, things would happen around the house. So we got a ghost box and started to get to know my friend for life. We got answers like evil, trapped, and answered no to being a person who had passed. We did answer yes to demon. Fast forward to my son being born, first son and only mate of my generation for my family. And my son, who is autistic, will constantly point to places in our home and say "guy," or tell me or my wife to look at nothing. When I ask him what it is he sees, he says "guy." Even Ghostbox, EVP, and EMF sessions, both my son, home, and gone, have named at least 2 entities so far. We have Bob and Walter. The total of 15 entities due to my son not wanting to come into the house one day without friend. Nothing was there, so my wife invited all of my son's friends into the house. But bottom line is that I have a leech of sorts that has gone from messing with my stuff to attacking people who it disapproves of, now to basically my son having an invisible friend that we all hang out with, and Ghostbox EVP have hours of conversation. I could go on for weeks with this, so I can't be the only one. My Haunted Childhood Home by user / the outer net is scary. Between the ages of 9 and 12, my family lived in a haunted house, or what we believed to be haunted. We had to move. Hold on, my nose is dripping. We had to move into it for my father's work, but left as soon as his job there allowed him to. He got a new job back in our home province. We moved into a fairly new neighborhood, and the house we lived in was nice. Nothing that we know happened there to cause the haunting, although Mount Mom was a theory. It's a place with a large amount of First Nations, and she believes that maybe something happened on the land long ago, or that there is someone buried nearby. Anyways, the actual story starts shortly after we moved in. It had 3 floors, and right from the start, me and my sister refused to go in or use the basement bathroom. It just had a weird feeling to it. A few weeks in, my mom started to notice shadows moving up and down our stairs to the upstairs floor. This set of stairs was the shape with no window near it, so it's not like passing cars were causing the shadows. Our dog likes to sleep on the stairs, but often sometimes would wake up and run off as if something was bothering them. All of this was minor compared to some of the larger events that happened. First thing was that one of my mom's pictures of my family that had been on the wall for about a year at this point fell off the wall with absolutely no reason. No one was near it, and the second major thing that happened was when my father was away. Me, my sister, and my mom decided to have a sleepover in the basement. After we had finished watching our movie and gotten into our air beds, my mom asked, "So who's going to turn off the light?" Within a second, the light was out. She hadn't told us at this point she thought something was haunting the house, but man, could you tell she was freaked out. None of us got up to see if it had just burned out, but the next day when she checked, the light worked just fine. The last major thing that happened there happened to me. It was late at night, and I was asleep in my bed. I woke up for some reason and looked around my room. I had a desk with a chair that I had left pulled out, and in the chair I saw an older lady. She had on a pearl necklace and gray hair. That is all I really remember, and she started to look at me, and me being a kid, I just hid under my blankets. Looking back on it now, though, she didn't last later. It only took the house a couple months to sell, but in that time, my mom must have bought replacement for every light in the house twice. Maybe she liked us and didn't want us to leave. At least that's what I like to think. This one is by user / tired and grumpy. My creepy child. Told you I'd be back. Here's a true story I wrote a few years ago about my creepy child. In the past, I was quite fascinated by all the things spooky. I was a horror film buff, loved a good book about true hauntings, and for many years I was a goth. And during that time I learned something. Kids are creepy, especially little girls, although, granted, Damien from The Omen wasn't exactly a ray of sunshine, but generally speaking, if there's a little girl in a horror film, you know at some point she's going to be climbing up walls or projectile vomiting over priests. That's just the way it is. Bearing this in mind, I can't deny that when I found out I was pregnant with my eldest, somewhere back in the back of my mind, there was the uneasy thought, what if she turns out to be creepy? Of course, the second she was born, the thought vanished entirely, and I was completely wrapped up in how freaking adorable and perfect and cute she was. She was quite possibly the most beautiful baby in the world ever. Okay, I might have been a bit biased, but you get the idea, not a creepy bone in her chubby little body. That is, until now. She's now coming up to 4 years old. She's extremely bright and extraordinarily eloquent for a 3-year-old. This means that sometimes she comes out with things that you wouldn't expect a child to say at the age she is. Up until now, when she has said something surprisingly clever, I must admit I do tend to be incredibly proud and secretly smug. Huh, my child is a genius. What good parents we must be. But recently, I've kind of been wishing she wasn't quite so eloquent, so as some of the random clever things she has been saying are truly terrifying. I mean, like stomach churning, we're going to need an exorcist terrifying. It started maybe a month or two ago. She started talking about Leo, her invisible friend. Wonderful, I thought to myself. Imaginary friends are creepy as, and this is always how it starts in films. Now, I knew she has a friend at school called Leo, so I just put it down to an overactive imagination. Even when she would tell me that Leo had climbed into bed with me and was hiding under the duvet by my feet, I didn't let it get to me. It's just harmless play, I would say to myself, and then would give myself a mental pat on the back for being so sensible and grown up about it. There was a time I would have freaked out about invisible little boys crawling into bed with me, but now, no. Now I was a fearless mum. Go me. After a few weeks, Sarah showed up. My daughter, I mean. Of course, we could not see her, just like that cheeky little bed-stealing scamp Leo. So now there were two. Fabulous. But just like she had an actual friend called Leo, she also knows Sarah, her dance teacher. So again, we just put it down to her imagination. All was well in the world with Leo and Sarah. They would chase around the house or have imaginary water balloon fights and hardly ever do anything creepy like perch on windowsills during the night to watch us sleep. Then, a week ago, we had my husband's parents over for dinner. We were enjoying a nice family dinner when out of nowhere my daughter starts talking about her friends, except now there are 3. Now there is a Clement. She does not know a Clement. There's no one by that name at her school. I checked. He is not a character from one of her books or from any of the cartoons she watches. I have no explanation for Clement, and she is not sure who he is either, really. Leo and Sarah are brother and sister, but Clement is just naughty. That's all we know about him. I would have much preferred him to be funny or silly, but no, all he is naughty. Great. And then she just blurts out, and you know Leo is dead. Sarah killed him. Dead like your granddad, Mummy. My mother-in-law and I just stared at each other, not saying a word, but safe to say we knew we were both thinking, what the actual fuck? My lovely husband senses my absolute horror at what my beautiful angel has just announced at the dinner table and tries to come to the rescue. But it's just pretend, darling, isn't it? He's okay, really. He's not really dead, he says. No, Daddy, he's really dead. Sarah killed him, she merrily replies, in between 2 mouthfuls of chips. I felt a bit sick at this point and was not looking forward She's sharing my bedroom with my daughter and her new mates at bedtime. Yes, my nearly 4-year-old still sleeps in our room. But that's a whole other post. So, as we were getting ready for bed, she starts talking about them again, this time adding that we have an angry lady called Violet living in our attic space. She is always cross and has purple lips. A fun fact about our attic space is it's not actually closed off by a wall. It just has a see-through banister to stop anything falling out, so I can see everything in our attic that overlooks my bed. I now know I'm never sleeping again. Awesome. So I said, sweetheart, can we talk about them now? They're only pretend, they're not real. What she said next and how she said it will probably haunt me forever. Her face dropped into a scowl. She came very close to my face, squinted her eyes, and said, they are real. Then started laughing and added, they're shouting, Mummy. They're always shouting. Hands changed and now 3. So as she grew up, we heard less and less about her invisible friends, but I must admit, not a night goes by that I don't look up to the attic space and imagine an angry Violet staring back at me. Just to update the story a little, last week I heard both my kids chanting in the playroom. I went to check on them and saw they had put some toys in a circle with a Woody doll in the middle. What are you guys up to? I asked, already dreading the answer. Oh, nothing, Mummy. We were just trying to summon the Woody demon. Oh, I replied. What is the Woody demon? Instantly regretted my question when my youngest said, a few days ago I heard Woody talk by himself, so now we want him to do it again. My kids are little. They shouldn't know anything about demons. It's not like me and my husband to talk about anything like that. And how the heck did they know what to chant and how to put their toys in a circle? Have kids? They said. It'll be fun, they said. Please don't use my story without my permission. I'll most likely say yes, but please ask first. On that note, you guys, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week. That is the end of our show for tonight. Next weekend, we got Mr. R.L. Poole. He's going to be talking about his new book. He actually wrote Ed Lee Skolnick's Code. And then we have Mr. John Yost talking about alien abduction. You guys, night night, love and light. Take care of my week.